In my not so humble opinion, there needs to be more games like Spiritfarer. Games that aren't centered around shooting people or getting the deadliest weapons or causing the biggest explosions. I remember seeing a tweet from a game dev years ago that said something along the lines of, "I hope I never have to research different weapon models and types of explosives ever again." And I think it's something that often gets overlooked in modern gaming. We're not in as much of a modern warfare rut as we were in previous years, but a majority of games do tend to still have kill a thing as their default player action. And not just kill a thing, but kill as many things as possible in order to gain new ways to kill even more things. You would think that players would have grown tired of this after 20 years, but apparently not, since it's still a newsworthy moment whenever a big, violent AAA franchise decides not to put out a yearly title. Enter Spiritfarer as the polar opposite to this. It is a game focused on peace, where rather than trying to shoot the biggest guns, you're trying to cook the best meals. Where instead of trying to cause the most collateral damage, you're trying to build the coziest home for your guests. And instead of killing a lot of alive people, you're putting to peace a lot of dead people. I probably need to explain that last point a little bit. In Spiritfarer you play as Stella, whose job it is to ferry the souls of those who have passed onto the great beyond. But, before these souls can make that final journey, they must first come to peace with their individual lingering issues. This is where you come in. You are essentially their fixer, giving them a place to stay, cooking their favourite meals, and carrying out the various errands that will somehow grant peace to these picky poltergeists. You do this by making use of your boat to sail to new locations, exploring those locations, and then upgrading your boat so that you can explore even more new locations. Now, I do have a lot of good to say about this game, but let me get some of the bad out first. I did have trouble with Spiritfarer in what I would call the first quarter to a third of the game. The main issue being I had no idea what I needed to do. A big aspect of this game is discovery. You sail your boat across the waves, coming across new islands with places to explore, people to meet, and resources to massively exploit. The problem is that there are actually quite a lot of things that aren't available to you until certain points later in the game. You can spend ages trying to find one particular ingredient for a specific food dish or a material for an upgrade, just to discover that you don't have the required ability to find those things. Or you don't have access to that one island that cultivates that specific kind of dirt. This happened several times, and it's probably the reason why my playthrough took an actual 42 hours. I fully understand and respect the intention to keep things mysterious and to give the player that sense of wonder and accomplishment on finally discovering those things they desperately need. But some kind of marker to tell the player that a quest was literally impossible to complete would have probably saved me a work day's worth of faffing around. And what also doesn't help is that the signposting for a lot of things is just very unclear at times. The kind of things that with the slightest of tweaks would have made for a much smoother experience. But without those tweaks led to a pile of frustrations that sometimes made me question whether I was actually enjoying myself or not. Here is a short list of some of the messaging issues I had during my playthrough. The icon for the player's boat in the map screen was minuscule, leading to time being spent just trying to find out where I actually was. There were no indicators for where the characters were on my boat, so unless they wanted to talk to me, I had to go hunting for them. This became especially painful later in the game when my boat got massive and contained dozens of buildings that my passengers could all randomly stumble into and I just have to guess where they were. Blocked route indicators looked like notifications, so I thought I needed to go and investigate something, only to be shown a big fat brick wall that didn't make it clear that what I actually needed to do was do a 180 and piss off. Quest titles and descriptions had zero additional information to help with what I might have needed to complete them. If a quest required me to have 5 bananas, 5 apples and 10 million rubber ducks, it wouldn't tell me how many of these I currently had or how many left I needed to get. This was especially weird considering these kinds of amounts were tracked in the upgrade subsection of the objectives. There's no global view of passenger stats, so 5 of them could be happy and 1 of them on the brink of starving to death and you wouldn't know until you'd walked past and spoken to every single one of them. And it isn't clear in areas with special resources, for example where comets fall, that the comets only actually fall near where the resource icon visually is, and not the entire area that was specifically marked out around the icon. So you could enter an area that looked like it was affected by falling comets and dick around in it for a couple of hours, with nothing to show for it except some severely dicked water. And there's probably some others, but I don't want to stroll too deeply into nitpick neighbourhood, as that wouldn't be useful for anyone. None of these aforementioned signposting issues were a deal breaker separately or together. They just added a lot more road bumps to the ride than I would have liked. Outside of these issues, Spiritfarer is wonderful. The gameplay itself, when you're not lost or stuck, can be surprisingly addictive. Finally finding that one island that has the last thing you need to complete an upgrade, which in turn will unlock a new area, which in turn will unlock another request, can lead to you spending hours upon hours in this peaceful world. This is helped along by the game's presentation. You've been looking at this footage, so you don't need me to say any more about how gorgeous the artwork is. The people and places are vibrant and imaginative, and even though there are plenty of elements that contradict one another, it all works really well together. In addition to this, the soundtrack and sound design in general is just as pleasing to experience. The highlight would have to be the track that plays when it comes to that bittersweet moment when you say goodbye to a now familiar friend. When I think of the music and the presentation, it really does conjure up a sense of peace. I'm going to throw in a quick whinge here that the Bus Stop Seals music was garbage, and the weird frame rate differences between the different characters threw me off a bit, but those are my only complaints. Now, when I say peace, I mean that holistically. Spiritfarer does peace in a big way, down to the game mechanics themselves. The way your inventory has no limits, the way the characters won't actually have anything bad permanently happen to them even if they're hungry for a while, all the way that you can balls up every single minigame in the dumbest way possible, and the punishment is nothing harsher than needing to try them again. This sounds like it runs the risk of becoming a completely toothless experience, and you may wonder if this is a game with no challenge, and therefore no stakes, and therefore no meaning. But I would argue that there is sufficient challenge in that you still have to actively go out into the world and find or craft the things you need, overcome platforming segments, and even do some deduction work when trying to figure out what meals your passengers will love or hate. And none of this touches on Spiritfarer's biggest challenge, the emotional challenge. I started playing this game long after it came out, and long after everyone had applauded it for managing to strike such strong reactions in most of the people that played it. So I went in with a light touch of cynicism, on top of the hardened layer of perma-cynicism that is my being, and started playing without expecting to be emotionally touched whatsoever. Mission fucking failed on that front. Whilst I never straight up bored like a YouTube reactor with overdue rent, I did quietly and stoically shed 1 or 2 tears at the passing of a few specific characters, and at the ending itself. How does Spiritfarer do this? How does it make you care for these 2D, whining, often static characters who are mostly mute except for the odd N64-esque warble? It does it through the gameplay. The constant loops you have to go through day in and day out supporting these characters to the point where they are familiar to you at a personal level. At first I thought it was frustrating busy work having to constantly feed these lunatics a variety of different meals, hugging them to make them feel better, and carrying out their nonsense final wishes that often amounted to nothing more than a very extended fetch quest or shopping list. But it's through that repetition and consistency that you gain that feeling of familiarity and warmth with these characters. It makes it all the more meaningful when you finally give Atul that bucket of fried chicken, when you scour the entire planet for the ingredients, or when you have to walk Alice back to her cottage that you had to edit and place on the ground floor because she's become too frail to climb the ladders. This is the one thing that games can do in storytelling that no other medium can. That interactivity that takes your actions and applies it to characters and events that you care about, giving you a deeper sense of involvement than any song, TV show or film could ever hope to achieve. It's what makes Spiritfarer truly special, and why I think everyone should play it. No, it's not perfect, and yes, it can be a bit of a faff at times, but that's nothing compared to the insights it provides and the moving experiences it contains. It's a truly wonderful game, and I implore everyone to go out of their way and give it a try. If for nothing else, just so you can sit back, look out to the horizon, and take in a moment. Cheers for sticking around to the end if you've actually been actively watching and not just having this on the background to help you sleep. If you've played Spiritfarer, please leave a comment with your thoughts or thoughts on my thoughts about it and how you feel about the game. And if you're so inclined, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. Cheers!